Times reported on a few months ago. They did an in-depth investigation of these, and they say the accident rate's up about 40% from 2013 to 2017. 133 service members have been killed in these type of unfortunate and tragic accidents. Here's what the Military Times wrote. They say, quote, "The rise is tied in part to the massive congressional budget cuts of 2013. Since then, it's been intensified by nonstop deployments of warplanes and their crews, an exodus of maintenance personnel, and deep cuts to pilots' flight training hours. That the spike began in 2013 is significant. That was the year sequestration, the automatic budget cuts agreed to by Congress and former President Barack Obama, took effect." So, Colonel, how can we reverse that?
Well, it's part of it. A big part of it is a funding issue. Or if you're not going to fund the military that you want for global operations on a constant basis, then you have to scale back what your aspirations are, where your national interests are at. So, just as an example, a fighter pilot in the Cold War would fly anywhere from 220 to 250 hours a year. The average fighter pilot is about 120. So you're flying half the time. You've got maybe 2 out of 5 aircraft that are even available to train on, and it just creates a situation where no funding, minimum maintainers, the people that work hard on the flight lines to keep these aircraft up, lack of spare parts, no lack of fuel, and just operational costs for getting these planes up. And then you have a young captain and his crew that gets on a plane, and you're asking them to undertake this fairly risky operation. So America has to decide, is it worth having the military that we want to secure U.S. interests globally or not?
It is astounding. I've been on aircraft carriers, 3 of them reporting for Fox News, and the work they do is heroic. There are a lot of young people who are out there on the flight line as these F-18s come in and try to hit that tripwire, and it's just an incredible, awe-inspiring experience to go through that, if anyone can do that. These floating cities, if you will, of 5,000 men and women out there.
This is not an indictment of the young men and women. I mean, they are shouldering a massive burden, but are we supporting them as they should be supported?
Well, that's the question.
It becomes a moral and ethical issue.
And how do we make it fairer for them? How do we support them further? What should the president, what should General Mattis do at the DOD, and what should Congress do to try and support those men and women as much as possible?
Right. The sequestration was intended to be so horrifically bad that the parties would both come into agreement on finding $1.2 trillion in savings. And yet what was intended never to have happened did, and now nobody wants to go back and revisit that. So Secretary Mattis has called for 3 to 5% growth over inflation in order to get out of this readiness hole, to provide the resources that our men and women in uniform need. And yet we see intransigence on Capitol Hill that doesn't address entitlement programs. I mean, 70 or 80% of national debt is driven by those sorts of accounts, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on the national debt. You could zero out the defense budget, and it wouldn't cause a ripple in reducing the national debt. So I think we're doing an injustice to our service members, and we're seeing the consequences of that.
And injustice to our service members, Lieutenant Colonel Dakota Wood, you could not have said it better. We should not be in this situation for these men and women in this country right now. Thank you for shedding light on it.
Yes, sir.
Of course. Martha.
And when we come back, we will move on to